All right. What's up, everyone? It's Goose, and today I got Astro gaming headphones. Today, we're not going over gaming headphones. Today, we're going to go over kind of guitars in different price points. Lord knows how much money I've spent on guitars over the years. And very often I'm asked about what guitar to get at certain price points. And I feel like saying a guitar is good for the price just isn't good enough. I said good a lot in that sentence, didn't I? And a lot of times I end up typing a wall of text that ends up being probably a little too much information, and I just wanted to make a video basically taking that wall of text and putting it into a video. So that's what I'm doing today. We're going to be looking at these three price points, basically under 600, between 600 and 1200, and then above $1,200. And at these price points, I'm going to be going over my experience with what to expect from certain things and why you should consider certain price points over others. Before we move on, if you like videos about guitar gear and nerding out about guitar gear, consider hitting like and subscribe. All right, so full transparency, I will not be going over where the guitar is made in this video. Labor in different countries and the price that costs is a completely different conversation in my opinion than what I'm going over in this video. I really just want to talk about the mechanical parts of a guitar and the quality that you could expect at these price points. And hopefully this video remains consistent until inflation just starts driving guitar prices up to crazy amounts again. All right, so the first price point we're going to be going over is under $600. To be very fair with everyone, at this price point, you're going to be making a lot of sacrifices. The first sacrifice is the pickup quality. The stock pickups on guitars at this price point are just not going to be very good. It stands to reason that a pair of good pickups, so think like your Fishmans or your DiMarzios or your Seymour Duncans, will cost almost 2/3 of the price of a guitar under $600. You're probably not going to get guitars with pickups worth that much. So this is the Sterling Axis. Going over the pickups first, I don't like them a lot. They're a little honky and a little overwound in my opinion. So I'm going to play a demo and you can hear for yourselves kind of what I'm talking about. So yeah, not my favorite pickups. I'm sure they work for some folks, but for me, I just don't feel like they have the clarity that I like in them. Moving on to other parts of this guitar, it also came with a tremolo bridge, and this tremolo is not seated very nicely. So this is how it actually came from the factory. I haven't done any adjustments to it yet, but you can tell that on the treble side here, it's just a lot taller and higher up off the body than the bass side. And this is easily fixed. However, another point to note is that the saddles, the screws on the saddles for the action adjustment are just super high off. And so when you're palm muting, that could hurt. We'll be going over another Sterling guitar at a higher price point that I feel like does fix the issues with this guitar. And in comparison to that guitar as well, the tuning pegs on this are very rough. So when you start tuning, you'll just feel the tuner kind of tick a little and then it starts to tune. So basically it catches a lot of times when you're trying to tune up or tune down your strings. One of the other things to note about this price point is the finish of the guitar. Sometimes you'll get a really cool finish. I actually think this looks pretty good and is actually pretty book matched, which is surprising to me. However, I have seen examples of this exact same finish with basically no waves at all in the quilted maple top. Also, some people might prefer this, but a lot of guitars at this price point have unfinished necks. So even though it feels not quite as smooth as like a satin neck, personally, I actually prefer this over like a gloss neck. I really hate gloss necks. So this isn't necessarily a con, but because it just costs less to not finish the neck, that's what you're gonna get. This is a Guild Surfliner and it's about the same at that price point. Basically kind of the similar thing. So you have an unfinished neck on the back. The pickups are not my favorite. I don't like the bridge pickup at all. The neck is all right, actually, though. And at this price point, I actually prefer when a guitar is just a simple single color gloss finish, because this gloss finish will look probably just as good as most other more expensive guitars with the same kind of finish. I mean, it's just a single color, so there's not any like particular patterns about it, but I do think it looks nice. And I think that's the best you can expect at this price point. I had a Chapman ML3 at this price point as well. Just similarly to that, I had to polish the frets on both this guitar and that Chapman, largely because I could not bend strings without feeling like I'm grinding the string to be breaking. So that's another thing to consider at this price point, is that sometimes fretwork is going to be very, very inconsistent. There are certain like import brands that will offer stainless steel frets. And that's actually insane because stainless steel fret refretting will cost you probably more than the value of the guitar. Given what I've said about the fret quality and the fret ends, having a stainless steel guitar at this price point without trying it out first might be something I would warn against. So regular frets are going to be easy for techs to work on. So if there's any like fret that's like high or any fret ends, it is possible for you to smooth them out and basically make the guitar extremely playable. If that happens with stainless steel frets, it's going to be much harder for the tech to go in and fix those errors. Stainless steel is just much more harsh on tools, and so you're going to be paying a lot more if, let's say, out of the box, your stainless steel frets have something that's just not sitting right or some high fret somewhere on the fretboard. You're going to be paying more out of pocket for that repair just because it's a stainless steel fret. So I think it's always worth, especially for budget guitars, to go and try them out in a store if you possibly can. So going over all these exceptions though, are there any reasons to consider a guitar at this price point? A large amount of the issues that I'm mentioning have to do with consistency. So you might find the same guitar here, but built better or built worse. So if there's a guitar at this price point you like, I would always consider going in person and checking for those things I mentioned. Checking for the bridge quality, checking for the tuning pegs, making sure they're smooth, and making sure that your fret ends aren't going to bug you if you're playing on them. And since it's the lowest price point, one of the things that you can do is just upgrade the parts. Tuners on a headstock can be upgraded. I actually have some locking tuners that I want to drop in onto this guitar, as well as pickups. That's something that a lot of folks upgrade. And the only caveat to replacing pickups is just making sure that the wiring will hold up. Sometimes you're going to be dealing with really poor wiring at this price. So just consider that when you're thinking about exchanging pickups. And so for a DIY platform, this is a great price point in my opinion. And if you can try the guitar in person and make sure that there's nothing here that's going to be bugging you, then go for it. All right, so the next price point we're going to be looking at is above $600, but below $1,200. I think most people consider this to be the sweet spot. The biggest improvements you're going to see is with the consistency of the build. So this is my Schecter Banshee Extreme. In 2020, when I wanted to restart my guitar journey, this was one of the 3 guitars I bought. I had also bought a Solar A2.7, as well as an Ibanez RGD 71ALANAB. The build quality on all 3 of these guitars, considering they potentially were made in the same factory, were actually really consistent and pretty close to each other. This one was actually the cheapest of them, but it ended up being the only one I kept. The stock pickups for all 3 of these guitars that I mentioned were passable, and while I ended up changing the pickups out of this one, the stock pickups in this were still way more preferable than anything I had tried under this price point. And I mentioned another Sterling guitar at a higher price point here, and this is the Mariposa, and I still have the plastic on the pickguard. So I actually haven't made too many adjustments to it, but the bridge just sat perfectly. It's incredibly smooth when you're using the tremolo here. I actually prefer to just use the tremolo bar here instead of the actual arm. And the saddles here don't have the screws for the action adjustment raised nearly quite as high. And so it's actually comfortable to rest your hand on it. And yeah, the Mariposa is a signature guitar. I think a lot of guitars at this price point, between $600 and $1,200, you're going to find a lot of import guitars that are also signature guitars. And signature guitars can be nice at this price point because they offer really unique specs. So stuff like the signature pickups from an artist, interesting control layouts for the electronics, interesting body shapes as well. I'm actually surprised that you end up getting locking tuners with this Sterling. And the tuners are much smoother than the Axis that I mentioned there. Like I could just go up and down without feeling like there's going to be something catching. I will say that I feel like the consistency of the fret ends, it doesn't really get better at this price. So my Solar A2.7 that I mentioned was really good, and so is this Mariposa. The fret ends are very good. However, this Schecter had really sharp fret ends at the edge of the fretboard until the temperature changed, and then they're no longer that way. So I don't know what's going on there, but I have played other guitars at this price, and I do think that it's still kind of inconsistent. Another inconsistency you're going to run into at this price is the nut quality. So you might run into plastic or graphite, and I really do think graphite is better. Plastic just ends up getting caught a lot. A lot of Ibanez guitars still use plastic nuts at this price. And so just keep that in mind. It is an easy upgrade. It should be very easy for a tech or even yourself to swap out for a graphite nut. Also, you're not going to get higher quality finishes at this price. This quilt is a little inconsistent. And I actually have a friend with the same guitar that has a completely different looking quilt. So they're super inconsistent. I know wood is supposed to differ, but the reason why you pay for like higher grade wood finishes is so that you can get them book matched and consistent, and you're just not going to get that at this price. However, the reason why I say this is the sweet spot for guitars in terms of price, I think is because the bridge quality and the tuner quality is usually just as good as anything higher than this. And replacing a nut is really cheap and inexpensive, so you can essentially get a guitar to feel like a more expensive guitar at this price, maybe just without the looks. So unlike the lower price where I feel like I had to go in and like smooth out the frets myself, I've never had to feel like I had to do that at this price as well. So basically between the bridge and the tuners, you're just getting something that's already really playable out of the box and definitely worth the price and at a good sweet spot in my opinion. All right, so moving on to guitars above $1,200, I think at this point it is fair to say you're going to start to get diminishing returns. However, let's go over the things that definitely should be a requirement for a guitar at this price point if you're going to consider getting one. All the hardware, so tuners, bridge, frets, that should all be top of the line and really well set up. It should be already the highest tier of whatever the suppliers that they use, either Floyd Rose, tremolos, any other like floating tremolos, or even hardtail bridges and whatnot. It should be among the highest like tier of products that the supplier should provide at this price. Tuners should be smooth, although surprisingly you might not get locking tuners at this price. So this is my Edwards EZ18007SN. And you thought Ibanez names were bad, but an Edwards is basically an ESP company, and yeah, they don't have locking tuners even though it's right at that $1,200 mark. Some people don't like locking tuners as much as regular tuners, so maybe that's why. And also note that the type of bridge is not indicative of the quality of the guitar. So a hardtail, Evertune, Floyd, whatever, they're all like good quality, and you shouldn't think of like one as better than the other. It all depends on what you want. At this price also, you're going to get name brand pickups. So you're going to get stuff like Seymour Duncan's, you're going to get DiMarzio's, Fishman's, bare knuckles. And the quality of the wiring at this price should be just top notch. You shouldn't be getting anything cutting out or any like loose knobs or input jacks being like loose and whatnot. It should be all really solid feeling. And cheap plastic nuts are rare at this price. This one has a bone nut, but a graphite nut is also common here. Onto little details. So for any bolt-ons at this price, the neck pocket joints should be very secure. You shouldn't be seeing any gaps like in between the neck and the body. Side dots should be very clear and very precisely cut. Sometimes at lower prices, you're going to get side dots that are very like smudgy and they don't look quite as clear. You shouldn't have that issue once you get over this price. And a lot of guitars have extra reinforcement in the neck, so you're thinking like carbon fiber or like metal, some kind of metal rods that are also helping the truss rod to stay as stable as possible. Once you get past $2,000, you're going to either be paying for something like a Kiesel where it offers you kind of custom shop level of spec, or you're going to be paying a lot for brand name. So think Fender, think Gibson, PRS, and some of these guitars can get to the $10,000 mark. And well, I'm not going to judge if you do get a guitar at that price.
I'm totally judging.
But going with the historic brand versus something more modern, you're going to not get the same amount of kit. The specs are going to end up being more vintage because that's what people want. And that's totally fair. People want those vintage sounds, and I would never judge anyone for that. Just know that if you're going in thinking a Les Paul should have the same kind of spec as a Kiesel, that's not what a Les Paul is made for. It's made more for that vintage tone. And even though they are used in metal, I think for modern metal, I think you probably would do better with something more like a Kiesel or like an Aristides. And a lot of people really like that vintage look. Like people just want a guitar that's from an era that they really appreciate the music from. And I can totally get behind that. That's kind of one of the reasons why I got a Squier Strat as my first guitar, because all the bands I liked were playing Strats. But other than the historical brands, after $2,000, you're also going to be seeing other brands making really unique things. So think something like an OD guitar, where they basically carve a lot of patterns into the body itself, or like Aristides, where they're building guitars not even out of wood anymore. Stuff that looks super genty. And while plugging in any of these guitars won't get you a better tone than stuff that I mentioned at that sweet spot, I would actually argue that the vibe of a guitar might make you a better player. If the appearance of something makes you happier when you're playing, I think you're just going to enjoy yourself more, and you're going to be able to practice more as well. and that might just make you better. But that same rule can also apply for the budget guitars. I actually just dug this out of the closet. This is actually my first guitar, electric guitar that I ever got. This is a Squier Stratocaster. It does need a little bit of TLC. I haven't touched this in a very, very long time, and I'm planning on making some modifications to it. I was super happy with this when I first got it, and honestly, during that era, I probably made the most progress as a guitar player than I ever did anytime after, because of how happy I was playing this thing. And it wasn't more than $150 when I was a kid. But my point is that whether it be $100-something or $10,000, like some of those vintage guitar brands that I mentioned, you can be happy with the guitar and make a lot of progress as a guitarist. And at lower price point, really the only thing setting you back is the hardware. For this guitar, I'm going to be upgrading it. I'm going to be replacing all the pickups in here because they don't sound that great. Doing a little bit on the tuners. I might even just replace the whole neck altogether. And I might make a video on the changes I've made. However, this guitar is just as legitimate as my Kiesels. This Kiesel Solo is the most expensive guitar that I own. And honestly, if I just get the parts, the hardware on this guitar up to match the parts on this guitar, I don't think that I would be playing any worse. And even with the hardware updated, this won't be a nearly $3,000 guitar. So at the end of the day, this can be just as strong of a performer as this guitar when I'm playing. So yeah, I hope this video helps anyone kind of looking to upgrade, or even anyone trying to look into which guitar to get first and don't know which price point to start at. And I'd also like to know what any of you think the sweet spot for a guitar is in terms of price. Let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, that's gonna do it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Later.